Welcome to BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. We are moms on a mission to share women's stories about life, fitness, aging, relationships, travel, and much more. Hello, friends, and thanks for listening. I just wanted to take a second to give you a quick reminder about subscribing to the show. If you have not already, just take a moment and do so. This will make sure that you never miss a daily bite or an upcoming episode. And in addition to that, if you have a few extra moments and like to drop us a review, we'd really appreciate it. And there's also a sponsor of the show located at the bottom of all of our episodes. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being badass. Hello, friends, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. In today's special episode, we have the marvelous Melissa on, who takes us on a very remarkable journey from her own personal battle of an eating disorder to now a thriving therapist, dietitian, and co-owner of Omni Counseling and Nutrition. Melissa, she's an open book, and she really talks about her struggles with eating disorders and the pivotal moments of when she reached out for help. This was a very impactful episode, and Melissa, we're very lucky to have you here today, and excited to dive in more. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So, Melissa, you have a very interesting background that has led you, I believe, to your current profession. Do you want to tell people what you currently do and kind of how you got into that profession? What led you there?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a therapist as well as a dietitian, and I specialize in anything related to eating disorders, disordered eating, body image issues, kind of anything along that spectrum. And so the way that I got started in this work is really struggling with my own eating disorder for quite a long time. Started when I was around 16 years old, and I consider myself recovered around 26 years old. So struggled for quite a long time, about 10 years, just going through lots of ups and downs of my own recovery from my own disordered eating, and lots of body image issues. And kind of along the way, as a lot of people do that have eating disorders, they think that if they just learn everything about nutrition, that will then cure them and solve their eating disorder. And so I thought this as well. I thought, why not go and study something, that I'm already completely obsessed about? And so this is what, amongst other things, led me to getting my degree in nutrition as an undergrad. And, meanwhile, I was very interested in nutrition, was always very interested in health and, everything associated with that, but became a dietitian and worked for about 8 years in that profession. Mm-hmm. And along the way, thankfully, eventually recovered from my own eating disorder. And during that time, when I was a dietitian, I realized that when I was working with people, once they started, because as a dietitian, you really do a lot of educating, but you don't really get into a lot of the underneath emotions about. Right. And so, when I would talk with clients, patients, and they would start talking about it, and they'd say, well, I know how to eat healthy, or I know I'm not supposed to eat this, or I should eat this, but I can't do that. And it's because of how I'm feeling, or it's because of what I'm going through in my life at the time. And it was when people started to talk about that I realized this is what I want to know more about. I want to know more about what is the underneath of this person? What are the reasons why they are not eating or eating too much, or, just struggling with their life in general. And so anyways, kind of along my journey as a dietitian, I realized I want to be a therapist. Like, I want to really know what's going on with people underneath it. And so, recovered from my own eating disorder, thankfully, and then decided to go back to school to get my degree in counseling. And finished that after a very long journey. And so now, thankfully, I have been able to kind of mend the two pieces of the nutrition and the counseling and use those both with my work with clients.
And you have your own business now, correct?
Correct. I have my own business. Well, I have a co-partner that we co-own the business with. But at first, I did start out with my own business and then join forces with another person. But yeah, we have our own business called Omni Counseling and Nutrition, and my business partner is also a therapist and a dietitian. So we kind of both have this unique blend of being able to see people for both sides of counseling and nutrition, which when people are struggling with eating disorders, they really need both sides of that. Because I always say with an eating disorder, it's about the food and it's not about the food. And so we talk a lot about food, and then we talk a lot about all of the other things that lead to them using food in a way that isn't healthy.
How did your eating disorder manifest itself? So, and you can do some educating here, but like anorexia, bulimia, combination, or like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. All of the above. So, what kind of, and this is, I think, fairly typical now that I've heard what feels like thousands of other people's stories, but probably hundreds in realistically speaking, started with, just wanting to eat healthier, maybe wanting to just like lose a little bit of weight,
Were you overweight as a child, or?
I was never in a larger body. I was always in a thin body. However, I was but I was raised in Orange County, California, which is very image focused. How you look is very important. And I just never felt like I fit in. I never looked like the kind of typical California girl. And so I always just felt really like just out of place and uncomfortable, not to mention that, pretty much everyone does when you're a teenager, adolescent teenager, you just feel uncomfortable in your body. And so yeah, just kind of, wanting to feel better in my body, along with having parents that were also very obsessed in their own way with food and body and body image. So yeah, started out with restriction and figured out that it was a really good way for me to feel very in control of also an out of control life that was going on. There was a lot of family issues that were going on at the time. My parents were going through a divorce. There was just a lot happening in my life that felt very out of control. And when it came down to it, restricting food felt like this one thing that I could control. And that felt really good to me. So started out with restriction, and then kind of as the years went on, morphed into, as it often does for most people, at some point your body reaches a point where you just literally cannot restrict anymore. Your body wants to stay alive, fortunately. And so anyways, this led into reactive binging, which went on for years. And then binging along with, and while I was never bulimic in the typical way of what we think about binging and purging, but there was a lot of compensating with exercise and then restriction after the binging.
So it's kind of like a just back and forth, right? You'd have those moments of eat too much and then feel guilty about it and then restrict your eating and then just going back and forth with
exactly. And then over exercise and exactly.
Well, people don't, I don't think a lot of people understand that over exercising is also a form of purging, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Jenny. It's completely a form of purging. And so, back in the day, but, also it's a form of purging that, again, living in Colorado is very encouraged.
And acceptable, right? And
absolutely. Yeah, completely acceptable. And so, having at that point, I had moved to Colorado, thankfully had left California, but, then I'm living in this environment where, going to cycling classes for hours a day was completely acceptable. Actually, it was praised. And so, just doing other things, other endurance activities. So that was then another cycle that I had to figure out how to heal from and how to get, really under control.
My question is, at what point did you realize you had the problem or a problem, or admitted to yourself that you had, you needed help? Or was it someone approaching you and saying, hey, Melissa, I think something's going on?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So the first time it was when I was 16 and my mom approached me. And at that point I was, like I said, I was very, very good at restricting. And so, and I had lost weight very quickly. And so it was very obvious that I was struggling. And so my mom approached me and said, you have to get help. You can't continue like this. And I think, and at that point, I mean, it really was, my eating disorder was such a cry for help. And I was actually very grateful that she asked that. And I actually credit that my eating disorder in a way saved my life because it led me to start my own therapy. And so that was kind of the first bout of my recovery was, towards the later years of high school. But then once I went off to college, I had gained a little bit of weight and I thought, oh, I'm fine, I'm recovered. Was not at all.
Right.
And was still, while I wasn't, you didn't look at me and immediately assume I had an eating disorder. Underneath it, I was extremely unhappy and just really, really still struggling with my behaviors. So, but then I was on my own, in college and even after that. And at that point, it wasn't until I was 23 years old that really the binging and overcompensating for that binging got so out of hand that I myself decided to get help on my own. And so that was kind of like right after I graduated from college. And at that point, I went back to therapy and really started to be honest about all of the behaviors that I was doing, which also at the time I was working as a dietitian. And so it felt very shameful to be doing these behaviors while knowing how unhealthy they were and also, teaching other people how to be healthy and live their best lives.
Right, right. So did Colorado happen because of college? Did you move out here because of college?
I did. I moved out here, because of college, yes. And also really, like I mentioned earlier, my family life was just kind of out of control. And so it was also to really get away from my parents and kind of get away from that toxic environment that I was involved in. Yeah.
So Melissa, let's talk about not only have you had this, really, I think inspiring journey. Obviously you deal with clients every day to day about, helping them with their current, struggles. In addition to that, you are a mom. You have been a mom. You have a son. Let's hear about how that's kind of been a balancing act as you've now been in your professional career, and also, raising your son.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I have a son. He's about to turn 5, and he's, as most parents I think would say, he's the light of my life. And and I think my son, actually having my son is also actually so much related to my own eating disorder recovery as well. So I think it's all full circle, because definitely going through an eating disorder, you sometimes worry that you will never be able to have kids. And that's a very common narrative. And also I struggled with my own infertility as well. So with having him, and so also having him is kind of like this, big FU to my eating disorder, that, I can recover and have a healthy child and all of that. But yeah, I think, yes. So running a business and having a child is a balancing act. And I guess the way that I even think about balancing act is like, actually nothing's ever in balance, right? Like there's always pieces of it constantly of feeling like I want to work less and be with him more. No, I want to work more and not be with him less, but that's just a consequence of it. And how do I kind of like allow that to just be a part of my identity and not feel guilt about that, right? Because as I'm sure, right, you both know, like the mom guilt is just ever present.
It doesn't matter if you stay home, if you work, it's like the mom guilt is always there. And I found that when I was at work, I was like feeling guilty that I was missing certain things at home. And then I'm at home and I'm feeling guilty that I'm not at work doing the things that I need to do at work. And yeah, it's a real struggle.
Yes, it is such a struggle. And I think, Yeah, kind of like to answer your question, Laura, of like, how do I do that? I think what I have learned, and this is a lot of times what because I also work with a lot of moms as well as clients. And so, they also bring up the guilt. And the way that I actually like to look at this guilt piece and the balance or whatever is I almost like to look at guilt as like, it's like your check engine light, right? Or like a faulty check engine light on your car, is that it's always on, right? And it's always on. And actually we never know, oh, is that really something that I need to like take into my mechanic, or do I just ignore it? And so the way that I look at that guilt is it is most of the time just something that is there that I just need to ignore, and I don't use it as a moral compass. And so, because like you said, Jenny, it's that guilt is just, it's always there no matter what you do. It's like you can't do anything right. And so I try to just look at that guilt as like, it's just a feeling, right? If I'm feeling guilty if I have a week where I'm working a lot and I'm not around my son as much, I can just see that as just a feeling and I don't have to do anything about it. And, also same with, if I'm not working as much and I'm with my son more and I feel guilty if I'm, not with my clients as much. It's like, okay, well, there's that guilt again. Like it's there. It's always there. And I can just allow
it's like your little buddy.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
Guilt and worry are the two things that appeared as soon as I had kids and have not gone away. And I have older kids, as we talked about, but it hasn't gone away. And I don't know that it ever will go away. So it's like your new companions in life. So how do you coexist with that?
Right.
Totally.
So Melissa, let's go back to, you talked, I think, a little bit about infertility, correct? You want to tell us a little bit about how you were saying, with eating disorders, sometimes that does have an effect on someone's ability to later in life become pregnant, as you mentioned. Is that something that you were talking about? And then was that, do you think, one of the reasons that you struggled, or was it completely separate, or were you able to kind of figure out a correlation between that?
Okay. Yeah. So the infertility. Yeah. So yes, sometimes when people struggle with eating disorders, that can definitely affect their ability to, have children. And so even though I had been recovered for many years before we started trying to have kids, I think that, possibly from the stress of the eating disorder, possibly just from the stress of life, that getting pregnant was very difficult. And so, that was kind of like a whole other journey then of at first blaming myself for it of, okay, well, my body's the problem. I knew this would, or kind of, I thought this might be a thing, and it is a thing. And so that was actually something that I really had to work through in terms of like, because my doctors assured me, this is not your fault. This just happens, also it, partially not just me, there were pieces from my husband as well that were, possibly playing a role. And so, that was just a time that I really had to try to learn to give myself a lot of compassion around not blaming my body for, being the problem, which when you have an eating disorder, you feel like your body is always the problem. And so it was almost, again, like such a full circle type of moment of how can I work through this and not blame my body for this, right? Not make this that it's all my fault.
Well, and how did you go through, like when you go through stressful moments in your life, like your go-to has been when you were younger was control, like controlling your intake of food, controlling your exercise. How do you cope? What other things do you use to cope instead of going back to that old habit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, I really had to learn, and, throughout my recovery and also just throughout life, I had to learn how to feel my feelings, which was something that I was, as a lot of people aren't, and every parent's just doing the best they can do. But that was something that I was never taught as a child, that it was okay to feel my feelings, that it was, and I have a lot of feelings. I'm a very sensitive person. And so I really had to teach myself how to experience my feelings, how to allow them to just be present in my body without using food or exercise or some other method to push them down. So that's really how kind of, I deal with things now, is just allowing myself to just feel it. And, like we always tell our son when he has his tantrums, all feelings are good feelings, even if they don't feel good at the time.
Right.
But in your bio said something about that you've always been called a sensitive person. And I love that, because you're basically acknowledging, like, I have a lot of feelings, and that's probably why you're good at what you do, right? Because you have that empathy and you can really be with that person. But we all have coping mechanisms, right? Like, one of the things that I instantly do, and my husband does the same thing, is we go to humor. And it's like, how do you get out of this feeling as fast as possible?
My son's been saying recently, Mommy, instead of crying, just laugh, just don't cry, laugh. And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. Right. It doesn't always work, but I'm like,
right. Right. Like, he's already trying. And I think that is so interesting as a 6-year-old, that he's already kind of learned that. And I think that, that's also not necessarily the worst thing to do, right? Like, sometimes we do just want to laugh instead of cry. Sometimes it's okay to like have a positive spin on our feelings, right? If we're feeling sad, okay, let's go for a walk instead of feeling sad in this moment. But I think ultimately, like babies and toddlers are the best examples that we have of, because when they have a feeling, they just let it out. They don't care, right? What's going on. They don't care if you're in the grocery store line or wherever you are, right? They're just going to let it out. And I think that is such a good lesson for us to learn, that like, it's okay for us to have these feelings and let them out and experience them. Throughout our lives, we're told for so long, like, you're too sensitive.
Don't cry.
Don't cry. Oh, you're fine. And it just does such a disservice to us and being a human and having feelings.
It feels like we start out, it's almost like a bell curve. Like, we start out totally authentic, whatever is happening inside comes out, right? And then for years we're programmed, and we're told not to do certain things, behave certain ways. And then I feel like, what you just said, I'm learning now to show my feelings again. It's like, you have to come back around. And it's just so bizarre. And I mean, I feel like that, I'm in therapy too. And so much of what I'm doing is deprogramming all this shit. And it's not just my parents. It's not just school. It's all those things. It's media. It's the things we're looking at, watching, talking about, all those things together that program us in a certain way that we have to like deconstruct.
So Jenny, I'm glad you brought up media, because that's definitely something I'm going to talk about, Melissa. So you're 43. So we grew up in an era where there wasn't social media, right? There wasn't Instagram, there wasn't TikTok. Right. We had the stress of, just like you said, being a normal teenager and feeling like we needed to fit in and have a certain body image due to the magazines, TV. But how have you seen a shift with your clientele that are coming in now, that are maybe in that younger era of the 20s, that have had such an impactful experience with all of this social media that's really just constantly being thrown at them of how they're supposed to be or what they need to look like?
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, it is so much. And yeah, I mean, you're right, Lori. Like, I feel like it was hard enough for us growing up, right, with Teen Vogue and whatever else. But I mean, that was nothing, right, compared to especially what like teenagers and 20, people in their 20s are dealing with right now, where, right, I mean, it's like on Instagram, you can instantly edit your image. I mean, anyone can do it. And so everyone is comparing themselves to fake people on the internet, and they're doing it all the time, right? And it is just, I think it is just, it's so hard. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just so hard to be in that age range right now. I also think, and this is what I think maybe gives me a little bit of hope, is that there is also starting to be a narrative around that is happening online, that is happening on social media. And so I actually have seen a lot of people that I work with in their 20s and 30s that are like, you know what, I'm not on social media anymore, or I don't look at that, or I don't follow these people anymore. I'm following like these other accounts where people are not doing that, and they're posting real images of themselves and not just the perfect edited ones. And so, that is thankfully, encouraging. That's like, okay, maybe we're not just destined to, I don't know, just everyone having body image issues from these images. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the pressures to look a certain way and portray yourself online in a certain way these days is just, it's so much. And
well, do you guys remember the airbrushing? Like when we all realized that these models in magazines were airbrushed, that was like a huge, like mind-blowing moment. So there is something to the fact that I feel like we didn't know that before the airbrushing thing came out. And ever since then, we've kind of had the knowledge that they're editing their images, maybe not to the point where, I mean, people are truly like shedding 20 pounds and changing their facial structure and stuff like that. So it's definitely gone to the extreme, but I feel like at least we had some knowledge that there could be, some alterations.
Definitely. Right. I mean, at least it's out there now. However, it doesn't, and I think just like the psychology of our brain though, even though we know that, still, it's like our brain sees that image and it thinks that it's real, right? Like, it's like, it doesn't, right. It's like the difference between like kind of the knowledge, the rational part of our brain and the emotional part of our brain, right? Like the emotional part of our brain sees that image and instantly compares it. Really tell ourselves, okay, that's not a real image. I can't compare myself to that. But in that split second, we look at that image and we compare it. And that is what, I'm constantly working with people on, kind of like, like you said, deprogramming that.
I was just going to ask, because I traditionally think about young people coming to see an eating disorder specialist, but do you have a wide range of ages, or is it specifically one, age range?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have people that are, teenagers, which maybe that's what you typically think of, all the way up until right now. I think my oldest client is like 65. So, I mean, spans all ages. And definitely, the older that I've gotten in this profession, the more I actually see people that are just older. Because I think that, they want to see someone that's older, like also. And, but yeah, I always say, like, a lot of times people think that they'll just kind of grow out of their eating disorder or their body image issues. Oh, once I turn 40, I won't care about how I look anymore. Right. Then it won't, or once I become a parent, once I become a mom, I won't care about my body anymore. Right. Cause I'll be a mom and I'll whatever. No, that's not the case, unfortunately. And this is what I tell people is like, if you don't work on your recovery, you will not just outgrow your eating disorder. Unfortunately, because it's, it's always due to a lot of times, underlying issues. It's like, if you don't consciously work on that, you're not just going to get to a certain age and not care anymore.
I was going to say it's got to be constant work, because I can't imagine there's just a switch, like you said, or just like a particular point that somebody gets to and they're like, I'm cured. Like it just doesn't work like that, because there's so much, like you said, emotion behind it. And, it's really working with your clients to help them feel their feelings. Right.
Right.
With that said, with your experience, obviously being a mom and going through pregnancy, how is your resilience? Because that's obviously a big body image situation that we all go through. And we all have this body dysmorphia that goes on during pregnancy, right? Like, oh my gosh, my body is doing all kinds of crazy shit. And now, like,
talk about out of control.
Just like hair falling out, nails. I mean, like, just lots of stuff. So how was that extra hard for you, do you think, or were you at a point you felt comfortable?
Yeah, thankfully I was at a point where I felt comfortable in my own recovery and had, at that point I was, 38 when I was pregnant. And so had been in recovery for a long time. And so I felt very comfortable just letting my body do whatever it needed to do during pregnancy. I also, like I said, I work with a lot of moms, a lot of women that are pregnant and it is really hard because pregnancy, I always say, like, pregnancy and puberty are the two times in our life that our bodies change so rapidly and are completely out of our control, right?
I would add menopause.
And menopause.
Because I am shocked at the shit that is happening right now. And I was actually wondering if you're seeing an uptick in that age group.
Yes, actually I am. Yes. that is also another period of time. And so, right. And I'm sorry, I failed to mention it probably because I haven't done it myself yet. But yeah, but puberty, how long does that take? Years. Mm-hmm. Pregnancy, 9-10 months, right? So you think about that and it's like, oh my gosh, pregnancy is like, you're going through these body changes in 9 or 10 months. That's insane. And so, yeah, so that really is such a hard time for so many people because your body is like kind of, F you, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to support this baby that you're growing and have a healthy pregnancy. And I don't care if you don't like how it is, right? Like, that's what your body has to do.
I like the way you said it's like a giant FU because that's how it feels. Like it really does feel like that. And I still remember feeling totally awkward in my body when I was 13, 14 years old. And like you're getting, gaining weight in areas you've never gained weight before. And it's just like, you do feel like your body's like, fuck off,
Oh yeah. I mean, your body's like, I don't care how you feel. Like we're going to do whatever we need to do right now to make you healthy, and to just grow. So yeah, I mean, it is something that a lot of women struggle with. And, like you said, Lori, it's like, even if you haven't had an eating disorder or body image issues in the past, like pregnancy is just hard. It's like, I think in my life, I've met one woman that is really like, oh, I love being pregnant. Right. Yeah. Like,
I knew a surrogate and I was like, God bless you. Right. I can't imagine.
Right. It's just, it's a hard time.
Do you, so you talked a little bit about like infertility and how at first you were concerned that it was like linked to your eating disorder. Do you have any lasting health concerns or health issues from that period of time?
From my eating disorder? Mm-hmm. Thankfully I don't, at least at this time, and I say at least at this time, because I think in my lifespan, I hope I'm still relatively young, at 43.
We are. Jenny's young at 50.
Okay. Right. We're still pretty young, but also I don't know what the future brings. Right. And there was a long period of time where I was undernourishing myself and heavily over exercising. And I know, just because I know how that affects your bones. And so I think that is the one piece of it for me that I just don't know if there are any long-term effects of that. And I maybe won't know until I don't know, maybe 60, 70, 80, So it's hard to know. If there are long lasting effects, and that is the piece that, most of the research says, like, if you recover pretty much anything that you do, or I don't want to say anything, most of the damage that you do during your eating disorder is actually reversible. And so that's really encouraging. Yeah. However, the one piece is, bone density that, once you, go through that period of time where you can, grow your bones and have them be as strong as they can. Once you kind of reach that peak growth, you can't grow them anymore. Right. It's just the time period is done. And so unfortunately I was heavily in my eating disorder during that peak growth period of my bones. And so I don't know if, at some point I'm going to be falling and, breaking bones right and left. I hope not, but it's hard to know at this point.
Lori knows this, but I haven't shared it publicly, but I was diagnosed with osteoporosis. And what's interesting is I had a thyroid issue at 19 and it went undiagnosed for at least a year. And so I was, not getting the nutrients I needed and all that kind of stuff. And what happened was it turned into osteopenia very young. I found out I had osteopenia at 32 when I had my second daughter. And then I kind of kept an eye on it, and osteoporosis technically happened at 45, which is crazy. And so of course I've gone through this whole panic of, am I going to be like hunched over? Like, am I going to be breaking it? And I've broken a lot of bones, breast fractures. And,
Quit jumping off random shit, Jenny. And
I know. Well, and it doesn't happen that I tend to like be a little bit clumsy, but yeah. Okay. doctor echoed exactly what you're saying. She said when I had the peak of my illness was at those crucial bone building years. And so that I never reached peak bone mass, and then you start losing it, and you lose it more rapidly because you never met that, peak bone mass.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing you can do at that point is just, monitor it. And like, they're going to put me on a medication for it, which I hate, but I'd rather that than break bones. Right. But that's the thing that does concern me with, when I hear about people that have had eating disorders, it does concern me, the bone thing. So the sooner you can find that stuff out, the better.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and I think, that's something I just encourage my clients to get a bone density scan as soon as they can, just so that we can know and monitor it. Because I mean, and I don't know how, you've been breaking your bones. Laurie said you're jumping off things, but it's like
running into walls probably with Jenny.
Okay. But then, cause a lot of times too, people with eating disorders might also be athletes. And so as you guys know, it's like, well, that can definitely, while that's great and can be very healthy, especially if you're doing more risky, sports than like mountain biking, things like that, skiing, like you might be more prone to breaking something. And so, I think it's just good to know that of kind of what you're dealing with.
Most of those things are reversible and fully recoverable. So that's
definitely. It is. And that is sometimes the one encouraging piece for people going through it is that, if you recover, you're going to be okay. Most things will be okay. Yeah.
So the balancing, Melissa, I am curious. So in your spare time, you're obviously a busy entrepreneur and a mom, but what do you like to do to kind of keep your sanity? You're a giver. You give yourself every day to your clients, and you have a very selfless profession where you're helping others. But when you give and you give and you give, it takes a lot, right? And so how do you re-energize? What do you do to kind of refresh yourself and make sure you're your best for yourself, for your family, and for your clients?
Yeah. Stare at the wall. No.
Zone out.
No. Sometimes I'm just like, can I just stare at the wall and not talk to anyone? No. So for real though, I think, I have a dog and we live, in Colorado. We live right next to Green Mountain. And so I love hiking. That is definitely like my happy place is, hiking most of the time, just with my dog so that no one is talking to me.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can disconnect, right?
Right. Exactly. But occasionally with friends, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, my friends are also extremely important to me. And as a therapist, I have a lot of friends that are therapists as well. And so, we all get together and kind of like therapize each other, which I find very therapeutic. For myself. And I think, besides that, I'm such an introvert. And so sometimes just, the way that I kind of energize is just like being alone or, as much as I can, or just being at home, kind of doing nothing, or as much as I can do nothing with, my son running around. But, I mean, that is really how I energize. And, also like, yes, definitely like giving, as a mom, it is a lot, but most of the time I actually do find being with my son and being with my family as a rejuvenating time. Because I can just be myself and not, put on anything, not really, while I'm helping him or helping my family with, you don't
have to be on all the time. Yeah. Like you can be.
Exactly. I don't have to be on. I'm not, as I say, solving OPPs, solving other people's problems, right? I'm just being myself. So that's how I kind of like recharge and get my downtime.
One thing I always love to ask our guests is the question of what are you most excited for? You've done a lot of amazing stuff within your career and helping other people, but what for you do you have on tap? It could be trips or just, professional or, family. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, that's a good question. Gosh, and I wish that I had more things right now. So, but actually, maybe that is one thing that I should say is actually what I'm looking most forward to right now is having nothing planned. So we just, yeah. I mean, and I think that this kind of goes along with like being an introvert and needing a lot of downtime. We had kind of a busy summer, a lot of trips. We just had another trip a month ago. And so over the holidays, I've actually decided to opt out of a lot of things.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but I will say there's still that guilt in the back of my mind. It's like, oh, wait, but you should really plan more stuff because Christmas is such a magical time and kids need this and that to experience it. But I'm trying to just block that noise and just kind of like allow myself to have this downtime, like over the next month while everyone is running around like crazy. And we are doing some of that, but also we're not doing as much as we've done in years past. And I just feel really excited about that. And I feel really kind of like proud of myself that, that I've allowed myself to be like, you know what, I'm not going to send out holiday cards this year because
we just talked about that because I told Lori I'm not doing it either. And I do feel guilty, but I haven't done it for several years. Last year I did buy them and they sat on my counter and stressed me out. And I didn't even I sent like 5. So I'm like, we're done.
I know. I just got mine and I'm like, so much work. And it's like, it's really just like, I almost feel in today's era of technology, those virtual cards, they mean a lot too, right? Like you send a virtual card and, so yes, it's definitely, it's a struggle. Like you said, that balance of like being in the holiday spirit versus like, I'm still in the holiday spirit, but I don't have to, stress myself out about things. So
Right. Exactly. Like, we have our tree and we have, different things at our house, and which brings us joy. But besides that, I'm like, I don't need all the things.
You know what?
And so
your son is 5. Like they can only take in so much. It's going to be magical to him. No matter what,
Santa comes, it's magic.
I have one more question that Lori usually asks that I love, but like, what advice would you give your, that 16-year-old girl that started going down this path? What advice would you give to her now?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And, I saw that, that question, your intake, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, so much advice. Right. But also I don't know if that 16-year-old girl would have taken it. I know. To be honest with you. Right. But what I wish I could say to that 16-year-old girl is, for one, is your worth does not depend on how you look. That is hands down the biggest piece. Your worthiness is not about how you look. Also, it is not about how productive you are, how busy you are, how much people like you. I mean, when I was 16, I was just so wrapped up in just being everything for everyone else except for myself. Mm-hmm. And so really that is, I think, the biggest piece of advice that if I could go back and give my younger self, it's that, you are worthy just as you are.
You are an amazing person, and you are so, you are you, and you're an individual. And I think that's so important for us to realize. And it takes a while, right? For everybody to realize that we are all fucking badass, right? Like it takes time. And unfortunately,
it takes a lifetime.
It takes a lifetime, right? Because even in our adulthood, we are judged, and we let other people, hurt our feelings, or, we question certain things that we do or don't do, so I definitely, it's gradual baby steps, right, that we learn with time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, right. If only we could have the wisdom.
But look at how boring our lives would be. Like, come on. If we had all this great advice, we'd be like, what are we going to learn in the next 30 years?
That's true. I would have never done any of the stupid shit that I did in my 20s. So good point.
You wouldn't be in your current journey and your current path and your current profession, so you always look at all of those crazy events that happen within our lives that lead us to this very moment. Well, Melissa, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. We are so excited to see where your next steps take you, and for you to have some downtime over the holidays. It sounds amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for letting me be on the show. It's been so much fun.
Thanks for listening, friends. And until next time, keep being you and keep being badass.